Hello and welcome to Perspectives, our daily show in which we bring you a daily dose of news and views covering the topics that we hope are relevant to you, our audience. And joining me for Perspectives, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada for Satellite TV News, James Cousineau. James, good morning.
Good day. How are you today? I hope you're doing great on that side of the pond. Things in Canada are great. We're watching, of course, the Modi being inaugurated for his third term over the weekend, so we've got a lot to talk today.
Indeed, and we'll be covering an awful lot together. And together we will be bringing you our perspectives on that daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And also in today's show, as always, we'll be covering a few comments that we've received on the channel, and as before, some good, some bad, and we'll be giving our reaction and perspectives on those. And finally, as last week, of course, marked the 40th anniversary of those terrible events in 1984, we'll continue our look back at part of that week in June to remind our viewers of just how significant those events were. So sit back, relax, and to kick us off once again, James, what stories have you got for us today?
Well, at the top there, we were talking about the inauguration and the swearing in of Narendra Modi for a third term, which is quite unprecedented there. With one of the world's largest elections, of course, the world's eyes are upon India right now. And one of the big questions is how Narendra Modi is going to handle the international views that are being pressured on him by Amnesty International and other organizations and governments when it comes to human rights. When it comes to the freedom of religion, we know that there are issues of human right abuses when it comes to the actions against Sikhs, against Muslims, and against some Christian groups within India. So I've put together a bit of a video here just for our viewers who are not up to speed on the impacts or the ability to handle the religious human rights to improve on it and where they've been in the past.
Hey everyone, today we're diving into a topic that's not only timely but also deeply significant. It's a subject that touches the lives of millions and has far-reaching implications for the future of a diverse nation. Narendra Modi, a figure who has dominated Indian politics, has recently won his third term in office. His leadership style and policies have been both praised and criticized, making him a polarizing figure in the political landscape. Now, while this victory speaks volumes about his popularity, it also raises questions about the future of religious minorities in India, specifically Muslims, Sikhs, and Christians. Let's unpack this. These communities have historically faced various challenges, and Modi's return to power brings both hope and apprehension. Modi's leadership has been marked by remarkable economic initiatives, but also by controversy, especially regarding his government's policies toward religious minorities. His tenure has seen significant economic growth, yet the social fabric of the nation has been tested. So, what does another term under Modi mean for these communities? The stakes are high and the implications are profound. First up, the Muslim community. This group has been at the center of many debates and policies that have sparked national and international attention. There's been growing concern about the National Register of Citizens, or NRC, which aims to document all legal citizens. This policy has been a lightning rod for controversy. Critics argue that it could disenfranchise many Muslims in India. The fear is that this policy could lead to a significant number of people being declared stateless. With Modi back, the implementation of such policies could potentially accelerate, impacting millions. The anxiety within the community is palpable, and the need for clarity and fairness is more urgent than ever. Moving on to the Sikh community. This group has also been vocal about their concerns, particularly in the agricultural sector. The conversation here often revolves around the farmers' protest. This movement has been one of the largest and most sustained protests in recent Indian history. Many Sikh farmers felt that recent agricultural reforms were unfair, leading to massive protests. These reforms were seen as favoring large corporations over small farmers, threatening their livelihoods. With Modi's return, these communities are watching closely. They are keen to see if their voices will be heard and if their concerns will be addressed in a meaningful way. Will there be more dialogues, reforms, or a strengthening of current policies? Only time will tell. The future of these policies will significantly impact the agricultural landscape of India. And let's not forget about the Christians. This community, though smaller in number, has also faced its share of challenges. Reports of increasing hostility and even violence against Christians have been alarming. Incidents of churches being vandalized and individuals being targeted have raised serious concerns. With the continuation of Modi's governance, how will these issues be addressed? The community is looking for assurances and concrete actions to ensure their safety and rights. Will there be stronger protections, or will these communities feel further marginalized? The government's response will be crucial in shaping the future of religious harmony in India. These are not just political questions, they are human questions. They touch on the very essence of what it means to live in a diverse and democratic society. They affect millions of lives of people who hope, dream, and deserve a future where they can thrive without fear. The aspirations of these communities are intertwined with the broader narrative of India's progress. As we wrap up, it's crucial for us as global citizens, and especially for human rights advocates, to keep our eyes on these developments. The world is watching, and our collective voice can make a difference. Let's foster discussions, raise awareness, and most importantly, support those who find themselves at the crossroads of these significant changes. Our solidarity can provide strength to those who need it most. Thank you for tuning in. Your engagement and awareness are vital in these times of change. Let's keep striving for a world where every voice is heard and respected. Catch you next time. Together, we can build a future that honors diversity and promotes equality.
So as you can see from that video, it's been an issue within India for decades, whether the outside world has recognized it or not. Now it is very well known that there's been human rights abuses against the Muslims, against the Sikhs, against the certain Christian groups for decades. They have gone so far as to bulldoze what they call bulldoze evictions or bulldozer evictions, where they actually just flatten out people's homes with all of their personal belongings in it, not allowing them time to escape. So these are issues that the international world is watching, and Narendra Modi has the opportunity in his third term to change the narrative and show that there can be change, there can be acceptance, and there can be other religions all living in harmony in India, as they do in other countries around the globe.
Yeah, I was going to say it's an interesting perspective because, of course, Narendra Modi, now weakened for his third term, he's not going to have that carte blanche that he's had for his last two terms to steamroller, to bulldoze, to use that same term, to bulldoze his Hindu Rashtra narrative, his Hindu Rashtra agenda. So, of course, now the pushback has come through the democratic elections. So his hand is going to be significantly weakened for this third term. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting next few years. See what he can get away with.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, the international community has been working with them on trade, on many things, but they continually bring up the human rights abuses. And even with Trudeau, we spoke of on the last show, even that barb that he put in at the end of his congratulatory message to Modi was, about human rights, about the rule of law and that. So it's something that the international community is watching closely when it comes to Amnesty International, the Canadian government, the US, the UK, all over the world. There are concerns, and let's hope that with the message voters sent to him clearly that he didn't have the support that he thought he had and was anticipating, that change has to come for everyone in India to be treated equally. The other thing that the international community, of course, is concerned about are the extrajudicial killings and assassinations of foreign citizens on foreign soil. I think that with this also comes a very strong message to Modi that his people want peace. They want to have one nation come together as a whole, to recognize the uniqueness, the freedoms of each group, and allow that to happen, as opposed to trying to just wipe out anybody that's in opposition to them. So the second video here talks about the international impact that it's having in terms of the extrajudicial assassinations and the potential involvement of the Modi government in a lot more than we realize. So as you can see, it's having a large impact on the international relations of India with regards to trade and other concerns that it brings to the world in respecting rule of law in Canada, in the UK, in the US, and pretty much anywhere outside of their borders. It becomes a very large issue And I hope that that video kind of explains a bit more in depth for people that don't or didn't understand the depth of the impact that this has, not only on the local communities when someone is killed by a foreign government or potential involvement of a foreign government. So it really plays out a lot bigger than what most people consider just a local incident or a local crime.
Indeed, yeah. It's transnational repression is something that has hit the entire diaspora around the world. It's a very big issue, and I would contrast actually just picking up something that you mentioned about Trudeau. Trudeau has been very outspoken and very bold in calling out India for these infringements of basic human rights, and of course extending that into the diaspora through transnational repression. But here in the UK, we have our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who has been, I would say, passionately silent about the whole affair. There's been no public proclamations, there's been no public announcements. We do know that our community here in the UK is under direct threat from India. Threats to life warnings have been issued by law enforcement to many high-profile Khalistan campaigners, clearly indicating that Indian agents are operating here in the UK, and these high-profile people, their lives are literally under threat. And of course, we did have one gentleman in the community, Amritpal Singh, who died under very mysterious circumstances last year, just after Nijar in Canada. And of course, whilst our intelligence services have leaked all sorts of interesting snippets of info, clearly indicating there is a threat from India, our government has remained resolutely silent, which actually is shameful. We do have a change in government, and I'll come on to relevant points about this in my stories, but yeah, it's been, I would say the UK government has been painfully silent about this issue, and with a change of government probably coming in the next 4 weeks or so here in the UK, I think there could be a contrast. We could hear a very different scenario from the British government, James, to yours in Canada.
Absolutely. And of course, with election time and the concern of foreign interference with elections right now, I think that that plays into it in terms of how different governments react. We're still over a year away from our next election, so they've got a bit of a comfort zone in terms of that regard.
Indeed. Interesting times. So, okay, I'll start with my couple of stories. Now, I'm going to start we've talked yesterday about the results of the Indian elections, which threw up two very interesting, I would say, seismic scale results. This, of course, was Amritpal Singh's victory in the Punjab. And the reaction to that, of course, has been, I would say, very mixed, but very powerful and very polarised. On the Punjabi side and from the Sikh community, the reaction has been extensive. Social media has been packed full with celebrations, big proclamations, and just this groundswell of support for Amritpal Singh's victory in the Punjab in the recent elections. And of course, just to remind our viewers, he resides in jail, in Dibrugarh jail over in Assam, some 3,000 kilometres to the east, yet he stood for Parliament and of course he won with a massive thumping majority. Now what he has done since is release a message, and I've got to credit Baz News for releasing this. And let's just take a look at this. So Amritpal Singh's message regarding his electoral victory, rather than attributing the success to himself, he emphasised that it is a triumph for the resilient people of Punjab, particularly the Khalsa Panth. This reference to those supporters in the Punjab who've come out physically in his marches to come and support him. And of course, he very graciously has given his thanks to those people back in the Punjab who have, to great risk to themselves, put their vote in his camp. And he urged voters and well-wishers to refrain from celebrating during Galagura Week, which of course refers to the genocide, that is 1984 genocides. And he reminded everyone that the 40th anniversary, of course 1984, marks a time when the Indian government desecrated numerous gurdwaras, including the Harmandir Sahib, with armed attacks. And of course, it wasn't just the Golden Temple that was attacked, it was gurdwaras right across the Punjab in those days. Now, referring to his victory in that Khadur Sahib constituency, Amritpal Singh acknowledged it was a step towards their goal, but not the ultimate destination. He called for inspiration from the electorate's passion and stressed the importance of serious brainstorming and efforts towards mutual unity to address the challenges facing the Panth and the Punjab. Basically, what he's saying is, I think he's actually quite surprised by his victory here. He quite possibly didn't expect to win this. So, of course, he entered the race at the very last minute. He didn't have an agenda. One assumes a full detailed agenda written out about what he would do, what he would unroll once he was elected. But of course, he suddenly found himself elected, and God willing, he is going to get released in the foreseeable future. He has to step into responsible shoes. He's going to be responsible for his constituency. So what he's saying to the people of his constituency, thank you very much, but please now let's brainstorm, let's get together. This call for unity. And again, this is very much reflective of the Sikh community, that their decision-making process, the way they run governance, and this goes back to the Sikh Empire of the 19th century, their governance it's almost a unique concept of democracy, but their governance, their decision-making is always controlled by a group of people. It's always a mutual decision. There's no dictatorial decision-making in the Panth. So what he's asked for is this unity amongst the community, for them to all to get together and say, okay, where are we taking this? Where do we want to go with this? Because now that they've been given the power to take things forward. And it refers back to the challenge of steering Punjab's youth who are entangled in drug issues. And this has been a very hot topic that we've covered a lot on the channel, is that, of course, these drugs have been pouring into the Punjab, and Amritpal Singh has been a champion to try and prevent this, to call this out, to try and seduce the youth of Punjab who've been seduced by the drugs back onto the straight and narrow, back into a good life, back to their cultural, their Sikh heritage.
Right.
And he comes at the end here. Singh argued that they must not abandon the electoral arena. This refers to a big message that threads through a lot of the pro-Khalistan movement. Of course, the Khalistan movement in the 80s and 90s, it was to some degree a militant movement. It started off as a peaceful movement, but through no choice of its own, when the Indian government basically turned their arms onto the movement, it had to become a militant movement, more out of self-defense than anything else. And what Amritpal Singh is appealing to the people of the Punjab, and of course all Sikhs and pro-Khalistan, is we are a peaceful movement, and the power in our movement is through the process of law, the rule of law, and through democratic process. And this is why the referendum is proving so successful, why himself has proved so successful, is because the methodology now, the tactics, the strategy of the Khalistan movement is we are a peaceful and we are a law-abiding and we are a democratic movement, and we will achieve Khalistan through normal democratic means. And that is what he is appealing to here, is we must not abandon the electoral arena. We will do this, we'll do it properly, and we'll do it through democratic process. And his final message is, even if we win all 13 Lok Sabha seats in the Punjab, it will still only represent a small fraction of the 543 seats in Parliament. But by staying true to their heritage, Sikhs can harness a strength that has historically defeated great empires. And of course, he refers here to this rich, wonderful history of the Sikh community that goes back centuries, where they have had this great military history and this great peaceful history, where they have achieved great victories through peaceful and, of course, through the means of their historical warriors who have a fearsome reputation, so much so that the British Army were very pleased to welcome them into the British ranks as well. So that was...
And Canada, for that matter, as well.
Indeed. Now, what is interesting, I've mentioned about reactions to Amritpal Singh's victory, and of course, the son of Beant Singh, his victory in the other Punjabi constituency. Unsurprisingly, the Indian media have reacted in a very predictable manner. This is India Today when they talked about Amritpal Singh's victory. How Polwin of Khalistan sympathisers in Punjab is both a message and a warning. Now, Indian media, as we all know and we highlight on a regular basis on this channel, is one of the most partisan medias in the world. In the World Free Press Index, India ranks has just risen to 159th out of 183 countries. It's basically one of the worst free presses on the planet. It's heavily controlled by the central government, so there is no free press in India. So, of course, all India mainstream media is very partisan. It is very pro-Indian government. And unsurprisingly, the reaction to Amritpal Singh's victory is really not positive at all. They talk about fear and warning. It is a warning. What are they warning about? They refer to the growing political presence of extremist elements in Punjab. Extremist elements? This was a democratic referendum. These people aren't extremists. They're the people of the Punjab who voted. So they refer to these people. Again, it's following this age-old narrative that the pro-Khalistan movement are all fringe. They are extremists. They're terrorists. The Indian state branded Hardeep Singh Nijjar a terrorist, despite him being cleared by all Western legal process as not a terrorist. The Indian media perpetuates this myth that Khalistanis are extremists and terrorists, and is profoundly untrue, as we highlight on a regular basis on here. They are just ordinary men and women of the Sikh community who just want self-determination in their land. There is nothing extreme about that. It's the same story reflected across many parts of the world, and those people are not branded as extremists. So it's very particular to India. So even though only 2 of the 12 Khalistan sympathisers who contested the Lok Sabha elections won people's trust, the victory could synergise the separatist groups to some extent. They are running scared. New Delhi is fearing this whole upsurge of the pro-Khalistan movement. We've seen it across the diaspora. We've seen the hundreds of thousands of people turning out for the referendum in Canada, of course, James, and of course in the US and in the UK, Australia, in Europe. The movement is gaining momentum, and of course it's gained momentum in Punjab, and this is what they're so scared of. And as we referred to in our last show, Amritpal Singh being released back into the wild, back into the Punjab. He is a very charismatic figure. He is going to draw attention. He's going to draw people. He's going to become the focus of the Khalistan movement. So I sense exciting times ahead, James. What do you think?
I totally agree. And I think that it, again, is really showing how successful the elections were in India, that there was a lot less intimidation or vote fixing, however you want to put it. I think that the democratic process has definitely succeeded. And, I can't congratulate the people of India enough on a successful election all the way through.
Yeah, exciting times in India. So the next few years will unfold some interesting stories. So, okay, my next story. This comes actually very local to the UK. This one of our previous guests, Devinderjit Singh, is a very high-profile campaigner and a very senior. He had a very senior career with the British government, and he's one of the people behind the Sikh Manifesto. And this is a manifesto. We've got general elections coming up in the next few weeks here in the UK, and the Sikh Network, an organisation here in the UK that brings together many in the Sikh community, they have drawn up, each election, they draw up this manifesto, and it's designed very, very powerfully to try and get the Sikh community's message across into the political arena, basically to try and influence the politics here in this country. And of course, this is reflected in Canada and in the US in the same communities in the same way. But here in the UK, the latest manifesto has been released just in time for our elections on July the 4th. And it's broken down into 10 main areas, 10 main demands, really, of the British government. And I'll just break these. The full document is available. I've not been able to get the full document yet, but if you want to find the full document, if you search online, I think it should be released in the next few days, if not already. But basically, the summary, let's just quickly go through the summary. These are the points that the Sikh community must raise with their local representatives, and they are as follows. Section 1, more effective representation of Sikh issues in Parliament. Now, in the UK at the moment, I think we have 3 Sikh MPs, and they've been very, very powerful advocates for the Sikh community, but there is an expectation that in this election, there is probably going to be a Labour victory in this next election, according to all the polls. And there, of course, I think there are 10 to 12, maybe a dozen Sikh MPs or Sikh people standing for representation, for election in constituencies across the country. So it's very possible we could have quite a large Sikh representation in the UK Parliament in July onwards. Section 2, systematic collection and use of data on Sikhs by public bodies. Now, we have a census every 10 years here in the UK, and we don't have, in ethnic religious breakdowns, we don't have a tick box for the Sikh community. And I think there is a movement now to say we deserve a tick box. Every other religion seems to have a tick box. We want one of our own, which is a perfectly reasonable demand. Thirdly, promoting a better understanding of the Sikh identity and Sikh way of life. Yeah, this is a very general push to promoting what the Sikh community stands for, what the religion stands for and its heritage. And this is a very important way of getting this very good message of the Sikh community out into the wider community. Section 4, hate crimes targeting Sikhs and Sikh religious institutions. Unfortunately, hate crimes still go on here in the UK. Of course, they do occur across the diaspora. But we've had problems, particularly recently, with Narendra Modi's Hindutva army, particularly this online army, who've been whipping up this division, this inter-community division between Hindus and Sikhs and other communities. We've seen riots, we've seen physical fighting in the streets between the communities because these divisions have been driven, sourced from India deliberately to try and break up or create these gaps in the communities, create this hostility towards particularly the minorities like the Muslims and the Sikhs. And Section 5, improved education about Sikhs, Sikh history and safeguarding Sikh historical artefacts in the UK. And this comes back to spreading the message about what Sikhs stand for, spreading the message that Sikh heritage and Sikh history should not just be known about, but it, of course, should be protected and safeguarded.
Right.
Section 6, freedom of religion, the global rise of Hindu extremism and transnational repression by the Indian government. We've talked about this a lot, and we will continue, no doubt, to keep talking about it. This is a big thing. I've referred to Amritpal Singh Kandar, the poor martyr, who probably was murdered by India here in the UK, and the UK government at the moment still refusing to investigate that whole story, which much to our shame. So there has to be this continuing pressure on the British government and, of course, on the Canadian and the US government to do something about this transnational repression.
Yeah.
Section 7, release of Jagtar Singh Johal. Now, Jagtar Singh Johal, this is a disgusting story. This never ceases to appall me that nothing has been done about this. Jagtar Singh Johal is a British citizen who went to India 6-7 years ago to visit family, and he was abducted by law enforcement and suddenly vanished. And his family only found out that he'd been arrested through indirect means. And basically, he has resided in an Indian jail for over 6 years without trial. He was arrested under the National Security Act, this nefarious, this really questionable piece of legislation that allows the Indian state to essentially hold people in detention indefinitely. And Jagtar Singh Johal has been held without trial for over 6 years. The British government have done precisely nothing about it. We've heard lip service. We've heard David Cameron making, I would say, nonsensical statements, or just non-statements, and no official movement, no official stance by the British government except for epithets and rubbish. And there is a powerful movement in the UK who are appealing for the release of Jagtar Singh Johal, and they are constantly lobbying the British government, and they keep getting pushed back. They keep getting these promises which are meaningless, which are hollow, and it never ceases to amaze me just how India can get away with jailing a British citizen for over 6 years without trial, and nothing has been done about it. So, of course, the manifesto brings up this, and of course other Sikh political prisoners, and one of which, of course, is Amritpal Singh. There are still many who reside in Indian jails without trial under this really questionable legislation. So enough on that one.
It's a shame that in today's world, where it's supposed to be a democracy and a land that respects the rule of law, that these sort of things are still happening.
Yeah, and this is from the largest democracy in the world, which, it sounds so hollow. And we do highlight this on a regular basis. Section 8, independent public inquiry into the actions of the UK government and its motivations for anti-Sikh measures in the 1980s. Of course, this specifically references 1984. There was some really dodgy dealings between the UK government and the Indian government during the siege of the Golden Temple in 1984. We still don't know precisely what was said, what was agreed between the British and Indian governments. We do know, or leaks have been revealed, that Margaret Thatcher's government did confer with India and vice versa, and we believe that the SAS provided advice. And actually, interesting, the SAS, if this is true, told the Indian government, Indira Gandhi, don't do a full assault, do a precision attack where you drop in, abduct Bhindranwale, and minimise casualties. And what did India do? They just launched a full-scale military assault which killed tens of thousands of innocent men, women and children. Anyway, but what we here in the UK need to know, and what the Sikh community in both India and particularly here in the UK want to know, what did the UK government advise India? What was our involvement? What was the British involvement in this outrage? We want to know, and we deserve to know the truth 40 years later. Section 9, international recognition of that Sikh genocide and a UN-led inquiry. Absolutely, we touched on this many times. And finally, of course, the big one, application of self-determination to the Sikhs. And of course, this refers to Khalistan. Why can't Punjabis have the right to self-determination? Everybody in the world in a democracy has that fundamental right to self-determination. And this is something that the Sikh community will ask the British government to support.
Absolutely. And I mean, India itself was under British rule at one time, and with the partition of 1947 came the return of India to be a sovereign nation. And unfortunately, prior to British control or the colonization, the Sikhs did have a territory of their own, which was not returned to them with the partition of 1947. So.
Yeah, there's a I would say an interesting, and I use that word carefully, history between India and the UK, which still perpetuates today, as indeed we raise on a regular basis. So those are my stories. Now, I would like, as always, just to cover a few comments that we received, and we received many comments on this one. This was our podcast, our interview of Dr. Gurinder Grewal, a very interesting gentleman over in the US, and two comments which I particularly wanted to highlight here. The first one, Punjab is treated like Palestine is treated by Israel. Main target of India is to bring other states, people in Punjab through political system to change DNA, culture and language of Punjab and JK. Now, basically, essentially, to paraphrase this comment, what it's saying is there is this agenda by central Indian government to essentially invade the Punjab by stealth, to its ethnic cleansing by stealth. What they are trying to do, they are driving out the Punjabi language. It's no longer allowed in schools in the Punjab. If any children apparently speak Punjabi, their native language that they speak at home with their families, they are told not to. They are admonished. They are punished for speaking their own language. This is really not good. And of course, even textbooks, any material that the children are exposed to is written by the Indian central government. It's marginalising, it's excluding the Punjabi, the Sikh heritage. Very deliberate. It's a very insidious way of imposing. It's a bit like China and Tibet, and this is what India have done in Punjab. As I say, it's almost like an ethnic cleansing by stealth. They're driving out Punjabi culture, the native indigenous Punjabi, the Sikh culture, and replacing it with the Hindu central Indian culture. So a very powerful point, that one.
Yeah, and it's very similar to the history in Canada with the Indigenous peoples, going back to the Indigenous residential schools and how they tried to whitewash, so to speak, the Indigenous by getting rid of their culture, by getting rid of their languages, of isolation and so forth. So yeah, it's very, very similar to what happened here, and that we're paying for to try and find some way to make that up and to find reconciliation for it.
Yeah, it's an appalling thing to happen, particularly in any so-called democracy.
It is.
Second comment from Amritpal Singh. Now, this one, this is an interesting one. This referred to Dr. Grewal. Failed to answer one of your questions. Is that Sikhism is not an independent religion? Now, this is an argument I see quite a lot across social media about the whole religion of Sikhi. And of course, I'm not a Sikh and I'm no expert. But what I do know is that a lot of Hindus argue that Sikhism, that the Sikh religion is just effectively a subset of Hinduism. And Sikhs fight back very vociferously, say it is most definitely not. And this even goes back to the Indian constitution, where the Sikh representatives in 1947 refused to sign the Indian constitution because the constitution itself referred to Sikhs essentially as a subset of Hindus, which they said we are not. And many scholarly Hindus argue that they are, and vice versa. Many scholarly Sikhs say, no, we are not. And anybody who wants to defend this argument, and I have read this book, or most of this book, I'm a long way into it now. This is a very interesting book. Let me just find it for you. Here we are. So this book, We Are Not Hindus, Sikhs, We Are Not Hindus, by Baikan Singh Nabha. This is a very old book, and it's been revised many times since. But this is a very academic book, and anybody who believes that Sikhs are Hindus needs to read this book, and it argues very clearly, with no ambiguity, and it goes back to the sacred text, and it explains why Sikhs are a separate and independent religion. They are not Hindus, they're not Muslims, they are their own independent, separate religion. So I do urge anybody who wants to defend this whole argument to read this, and it arms you with all sorts of very unambiguous material to push back on this argument. And any Hindus who might feel that this is wrong, read this book and make up your own minds. So back to that comment. Yeah, I think this is a very relevant point that does crop up regularly in arguments and even in our own comments here.
Right.
Okay, and the final comment. This refers back to our last show, James. Now, we of course we talked a lot about the elections, and in India, EVMs, electronic voting machines were rolled out in India from about the 1990s onwards, and they were brought in originally, of course, to try and stop voter fraud. And there were lots of allegations that voter fraud across India was quite widespread. So they brought in these electronic machines, which are so open to fraud themselves. And of course, here in the West, in our own democracies, particularly in the US, I think they are quite extensive in the US now, but they are very vulnerable to accusations of fraud. And of course, this comment here refers to this very same accusation, saying that basically in India, because EVMs are so widespread now in India, that they are completely open to fraud. Now, if you look back through the history of EVMs in India, there have been several legal appeals to the state claiming that there is fraud going on with these electronic devices, which again, it's much easier to fraud an electronic device. It only takes literally it's one line of code or the press of a button, and suddenly a result can be completely reversed. But in the old days, with a piece of paper, and you make your cross in that piece of paper, it's a lot harder to create fraudulent results. Essentially, you just end up having to carry around boxfuls of fraudulent votes, which is a lot harder than the flick of a switch. So yeah, this comment here, essentially, it's a big allegation to make, and we have no evidence to say otherwise that the results were fair. We don't know, but certainly there are accusations flying around that maybe the EVMs actually created a bigger result for Modi. And maybe the clampdown on the EVMs actually reduced his result down from the 400 he expected down to the lower number he achieved. So yeah, James, that's a topic very relevant to all of us in the West, in our own democracies.
Absolutely. And we've seen the argument about the potential fraud and vote fixing and such going back to the claims of the last U.S. election, which were proved to be erroneous or fake news. But definitely, anywhere that there is an automated system, and pretty much any system, there's going to be people that will find ways to leverage it, to manipulate it, and to misuse it. So it's really important to ensure that they're used in the most efficient way with the most integrity in keeping that method done.
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. Right, so, and that brings us to our final segment of the show, which of course is our look back on the events of 1984 on a day-by-day basis. So as our last show, what we'll do, and again, I will credit the National Sikh Youth Federation for their excellent summary of what happened during those days. Now, of course, last show we covered when things began on the 1st of June. Today we're going to take a look at the next couple of days. This is the 2nd of June and the 3rd of June, when things really started picking up. So as before, I will just summarise what the Sikh Youth website describes happened on those 2 days. So, 2nd of June, 1984, Indira Gandhi makes an address for peace to the nation, in the full knowledge that on her orders, tens of thousands of army troops are planning to launch a full-scale war against a mass of unarmed civilian targets inside and around the complex. As she makes the address, those 6 murdered on the 1st of June by soldiers on her command are cremated. The telephone connections of the Golden Temple complex are now disconnected. The few armed Sikhs that we see make up only a fraction of the population of Punjab. The government also cuts off the entire Punjab state to the outside world, ensuring there are minimal witnesses to the carnage which is about to be unleashed upon the population. And then we move on to the 3rd of June, the following day. Now, the following day, the 3rd of June, is of course the Shaheed, or the martyrdom day of the 5th Guru, Guru Arjan Dev Ji. And because of this, over 10,000 people, families, including children, are crammed into the Golden Temple complex. Now, they'd come to the sacred Holy Temple to commemorate this important event, as they did every year. And of course, the Indian government and the Indian Armed Forces knew this, and they knew the complex was full of innocent men, women and children. And yet, they then imposed a 36-hour curfew across the Punjab, making sure that none of them could leave the site. The innocent families are trapped, and the authorities did this knowing full well what they were about to unleash. And what we also know is that international journalists gathered at the site were forcibly bussed away by the authorities. They were bussed away to the state border and dumped there deliberately without transport. In other words, designed to ensure that they could not witness and tell the world what was about to unfold. It was despicable, cynical, and an act more associated with the likes of Nazi Germany.
Yes.
And there we'll continue our day-by-day account of those events of 1984 tomorrow. James, awful stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so many things coming up this month to remember it. And today, actually, I had to head out to one of the major movie studios here in Vancouver, and I noticed some billboards up reminding people of the 40th anniversary of the genocide. So it's very interesting to see how much momentum the awareness campaign is picking up. And again, that's why we're here. We're just a couple of, English-speaking gentlemen trying to learn more about the culture and the history of the Sikh religion, of the people, of just such a rich culture that I think we are just trying to do our little part to bring a bit of understanding, because I think with understanding comes compassion and acceptance. So.
Absolutely, and it has been our job to try and spread this message to a wider audience of just how much suffering and outrage has been expounded upon the community. But there, we must leave it. And that was Perspectives, and we do hope you enjoyed the show today. Excuse me. Please do, of course, feel free to drop us a message either below or to our email, that's message@satellitetv.com, on any news items that you picked up that you think we should be talking about. And of course, as I mentioned yesterday, we will be covering several emails that we've received recently in shows over the coming days. So if you would like to be featured yourself, then you know where to send your message. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching Perspectives. It's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James.
Have a great day. Thanks for joining us.
You've been watching Perspectives. We'll see you next time.